Welcome to the Nutritional Revolution podcast. I'm your host, Kyla Chanel. I'm a performance nutritionist specializing in sex differences in sport. I work with athletes from all over the world through my online private practice and sports nutrition programs. We here at Nutritional Revolution are here to cut through the BS promoted in the media and give you the science, literally straight from the research articles, as well as share client success stories and experiences around nutrition and racing. Please keep in mind, this podcast is created strictly for educational purposes only and should never be used as a replacement for medical diagnosis and treatment. If you like what you hear today, we would love for you to subscribe and share. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Nutritional Revolution podcast. Today, we have for you guys Rita Ainsworth, and she is a trauma-informed human potential and resilience coach who helps high performers understand and work with their nervous system for better energy, clarity, and long-term performance. With a background in pharmacy, nervous system regulation, somatic, and parts work, and years in high-pressure performance marketing, she bridges science and lived experience to show how stress becomes fuel, how freeze derails performance, and how self-leadership keeps high performers in their window of tolerance. Rita's approach is grounded, practical, and deeply human, built on the belief that resilience comes from understanding your system, not fighting against it. When she's not coaching, she loves hiking in the beautiful hills of Wales and England. This was a great episode. I got some takeaways to add to my toolkit from her. Enjoy, you guys. Welcome back, everyone. We have for you guys Rita Ainsworth. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Very exciting.
I am very excited to talk to you. Rita is a good friend, an entrepreneur as well, and we get to talk about business happenings and all the things together. And she was telling me about her work, and I was like, we got to have you on the podcast because what you're doing for busy, stressed, burned out corporate folks could be absolutely applicable to the athletes that I work with and our listeners. So we're going to learn all kinds of ways how Rita how she's helping people now, but how her teachings can help some of our listeners. But before we do that, I'm going to have you, Rita, break down your 2 truths and a lie, or however you want to organize them.
I had lots of fun thinking. I was like, what can I share?
Yeah.
So the 3 statements.
Yes.
I once ran a half marathon without training.
Okay.
I hitchhiked across Europe in 2 days.
Whoa. Okay.
And I walked on hot burning coals.
Ooh. I feel like that's probably like a baby bathwater thing. I feel like you probably did do that. The hot coals thing. I could see that happening. The hitchhiked across Europe. That's a journey. But I feel like it could be done in 2 days, maybe. I have heard of people just like diving into half marathons. So I think that's possible. I'm going to go with the hitchhiked across Europe in 2 days because maybe that's like 3 days or maybe you never did it. I don't know. Well, we will find out. But don't tell me the answer. We will reveal it at the end of the episode. So diving in today, Rita, why don't you share a little bit with us about who you are, what you currently do, how you kind of got into doing what you do now?
It was a very organic journey. So right now I am a stress resilience coach, and I mostly work with burnt out professionals. A very good description: driven but drained. Really A players, high achievers, probably match a lot of your endurance athletes profile, but really burnt out and feeling like lost the love for life a little bit. So I help them to restore back that first energy and then the excitement just for everyday life. And my journey started in 2020. I was managing a team. I was wanting to be a good manager, to get people to perform at their best. And what I saw, the challenges were not the professional skills, but more of energy levels and also the mindset. limiting beliefs, fears of all kinds. I mean, I
Yeah.
also saw that in the same thing in myself.
Yeah.
And that took me uh, on a journey, coach training programs, different programs. So in the last 5, 6 years, I've really been doing a lot of digging, like where's that root cause? And
Mhm.
that took me to the nervous system. And I feel like okay, now I understand how we operate as humans, and
Yeah.
it's just much easier than to make life adjustments, like not
Yeah.
massive drastic changes, but daily adjustments that then make a big difference in people's lives.
Wow. Okay. This is interesting. I'm like excited. So, one of the things you work on is this like burnout piece. And this is like cumulative stress built up in the individual.
Exactly. Like I experienced that. I had multiple burnouts when I was working at an advertising agency where you can't
Hmm.
really switch off.
Mm,
And on average, people reach that, go from stress to chronic stress and then
hmm.
burnout like within 12, 16 months, depending on
Wow.
uh, their genetics, their existing health
Hmm.
conditions, and like a resilience level going into that.
Hmm.
But everyone, everyone reaches that point if they are pushing past their limits day in and day out. And it was I mean, it was very scary when it was happening to me, and I didn't know what was going on, and I
Hmm.
didn't know how long it'll last, and all that. And so now I feel like I want to pay forward and really help people to understand. One, try and help them not to get there, but once they're there, like, what do I do?
Right. Yeah. And so for our listeners, what are some of those states or symptoms physically, mentally, emotionally that you see in someone or what you experience personally too that's going through or hitting burnout?
Mm. So a lot of it, when we go into chronic stress, stress is more of anxiety. So stress is still very active state. So we will have trouble sleeping, falling asleep, waking up in the middle of the night, thinking about work or thinking about training, and constantly being switched on. So, very difficult for people to switch off. And then when you start going into burnout, the energy changes drastically. So you really, you barely get out of bed. You
Hmm.
need coffee. Like coffee gives you adrenaline, and that basically is stress. So you need stress to get you out of that shutdown state, and then you probably just going back and forth. So you're exhausted. You try everything to pull yourself out of that exhaustion through coffee, through sugar, through maybe having an argument with someone because that gives you energy and adrenaline. And it's
Oh,
like,
interesting.
so that's what gets you through the day, and then you go back to collapse. So that's normally what a functional freeze looks like. So these people are still, you still get a lot done, but you
Hmm.
do it with so much effort, and you really
Wow.
just kind of pulling your body along.
Yeah. So they're kind of like thriving to live in, they like need to live in the stress state to like function
Yeah,
because they're so burned out.
exactly.
Interesting. This for our listeners and tying the endurance athletes parts to it is we have something in the literature called overreaching and then overtraining syndrome. And there's kind of similar layers to that, but then there's also like blood work and things like that that we look at and um, you know, symptoms like if you took a couple of days of rest, do you still not feel recovered? Is that something that you experienced or tested or see your clients try and do as
Definitely.
well?
Yeah, I've not seen much testing, but a lot of times when you hit burnout, it's not just gonna be, one night sleep. It can take weeks, sometimes months. Like for me, when
Yeah.
I had severe burnout, it took me probably 3 months to get back
Hmm.
to just not even good state, just being out of that burnout state. I was back in stress really.
Yeah.
And without realizing that, I started pushing again, and then I ended up in the second burnout.
Mm.
How much quicker? It was like 6 months later.
Yeah.
So yeah, like burnout is really like some people go to like almost feeling like they completely can't get out of bed.
Mhm.
For me, it wasn't that. I could still do like hour, 2 hours of work a day.
Mhm.
But, everything felt like an effort, like watching a movie was an
Oh,
effort because it
yeah.
was so like visually
Yep.
stimulating and tiring for the brain to absorb everything. It's like that was kind of where I was, and it took me three months to get out of that.
Goodness. This does sound very similar to the overreaching and overtraining. So I know with that in the literature, there's parts of overreaching that almost are intentional with training to drive adaptation, right? So we build up the training blocks and a little bit like progressively, and then you deload, you take a recovery week. But it sounds like with burnout in like corporate setting is like there's not a recovery week. It's like it's just push 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 push. And in the literature on the endurance side, it's like if you're hitting overreaching, usually the recovery for that could be 1 week to a couple weeks. But if you're doing full overtraining, like you're saying, it could be months before you're getting back to, like, if you've pushed it past the overreaching consistently. So I do certainly see some overlap here, and that's why I'm like glad to have you on here and help explain some of this too. So tell us a little bit about like when you work with somebody like brand new, what are you assessing there initially with that person?
So when we start working together with someone, we look at what state they are in.
Mm-hmm.
When was the last time they were in a calm, regulated state?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not many people who are in that state. A lot of times it's, oh, I just get through the day. That's either they in stress or they in chronic stress. They've
Mm-hmm.
been there. A lot of times when people come to me because they know my story, they're already on that verge of burnout. So they know that if I continue this way, I'm really gonna, mess myself up. So we look at the nervous system state. We look at what is their relationship with rest, because it's not that they mentally they can't take break because they're constantly being pushed by we will probably talk about that, like those internal voices of like,
Mm-hmm.
if I stop I'll fail, if I
Mm-hmm.
take rest then maybe it means I'm lazy, if I'll fall behind. So all that mind chatter is what is pushing people to keep going,
Mm-hmm.
and that then leads to burnout. So we look at their their current state, where they're at, like what approach do we need to take? Are they already in burnout or
Mm-hmm.
still in stress? We look at also, I always ask, are you taking supplements? Because that's an easy part. Like it's such an easy and very impactful part of the stress and resilience building. So
Mm-hmm.
I always give my like the essential recommendations for people to start taking, so they immediately start fueling the body and
Mm.
more energy into the system.
Are you recommending like a multivitamin, or what's the supplement that you recommend?
I would never recommend a multivitamin because
Mm.
the dosage is not high enough.
Mm.
So I recommend high dose of magnesium, zinc, selenium from the minerals, then B complex, maybe something more specific like CoQ10 and PQQ for
Mm. Mhm.
energy. Maybe if there is like inflammation, glutathione, uh,
Mhm.
definitely vitamin C.
If you've ever tried to buy creatine or electrolytes online and wondered, is this actually legit? We got a quick fix. We built a full script dispensary for Nutritional Revolution listeners so you can shop trusted professional grade supplements that ship direct from the manufacturer, no random third party sellers, no sketchy storage. You'll find brands we use with our athletes all the time, like Thorne, Clean Athlete, Nordic Naturals, Pure Encapsulations, Designs for Health, Designs for Sport, etc., and a ton of NSF certified for sport options. Everyone gets 20% off always, and during promos, you can get up to as much as 35% off, and it's free to create an account. If you set up auto ship, you'll get an additional 5% off. Just open up the show notes and tap the full script link to get started.
We need higher doses for like really supporting system, because
Mm-hmm.
probably in the US and in the UK, the recommended guidelines are like minimum doses for feeling alive
Right.
and and really like fully nourished. It's just like, what
Yeah.
is the minimum? So I always
Yeah.
recommend higher doses that within still, healthy, safe range. But yeah, and that makes difference within like weeks.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. And so when you've assessed that someone has a level of burnout going on, how are you working with them and their nervous system to we got the supplements on board. What's then next to help them regulate? Like, are they still working in their burnout driven job while they're working with you, or how are they kind of navigating this burnout?
People have no choice really. If we could press a pause button and switch off for a month, that would be amazing. But we still need to do our daily jobs, and
Mhm.
a lot of people have families and kids, and so there's work, there's family stresses, and we just work with the situation. So what's the minimum they can do? What can they postpone? Like, can they get a cleaner instead of doing cleaning themselves? Can
Mm,
a partner help with preparing meals? Maybe
mhm,
they cancel the social engagements with friends because that's also taxing on the system. So for the body, it's good stress or bad stress is all still taking the same amount of energy, really. So what can I really now put on pause while I am really recovering, when I'm focusing on my sleep, on
mhm.
really good nutrition and hydration and nervous system regulation. So it's like asking for help
Mhm.
is a big one. And
Yeah.
I feel like the people who get burnt out, they're very bad at asking for help. So
Mhm.
we work through that. Well, it's like,
Yeah.
what is the belief of asking for help?
Mhm.
And then, as I mentioned, what is the belief of like, what if I pause? Then there's all sorts of fears come up. So we work through a lot of that.
Yeah.
So physical is one side of things, but mental is another big portion of the work that we do.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. Do you find, out of curiosity, more men versus women or vice versa that reach out and work with you for help? Like, talking about the asking for help, is there one gender that's better at asking for help than another?
I would say they're fairly similar. Like,
Oh, wow,
yeah,
that's great.
yeah. Mostly work with right now with performance marketers, and it's
Mhm.
kind of a 50-50 men and women. So I get both. And I think these fears are universal. All these beliefs are universal. I think sometimes for men it's even harder because they been conditioned by the society that they have to be the strong ones.
Mm, mhm.
So there's more in terms of identity. I have to provide, I have to be strong, I have to be, looking after my family. So yeah, I think it's these are universal things as much as we feel like we are different.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned kind of like finding those things too that you can cut out or delegate. I remember there was a book I read, I forget the author, and I think he called it like the 3 Ds, where it was like you either do it, you delegate it to somebody else, or you delete it.
Yeah.
And it was like categorizing your stuff of like how you can move stuff into certain areas and take a little bit of stress off your plate. It kind of sounds a little bit like that. And certainly I think about like when I work with clients and athletes, like the meal prep and the nutrition side can be a huge challenge for a lot of people to implement. Like, who is doing the prepping? Who has time to do the grocery shopping? Are you ordering your groceries in? Are you going to the store and picking them out? Like, what makes the most sense time wise, even financial wise? Like, food preference wise for the family, all of that stuff is has to be taken into consideration. And yeah, it's just these kind of like puzzle pieces and blocks, I guess, that need to be solved there. I think in your bio you had mentioned you trained in is it polyvagal theory?
Yes, so it's basically it came out not that actually long ago, and it's around our nervous system. So that we have three nervous system states. We have parasympathetic state, And
Mm-hmm.
in this state, body can be present and it can do all the repair that it needs to do and digest properly and feel connected and open and creative and all the wonderful things that
Mm-hmm.
comes with the state. And then there's two branches of vagus nerve. So there's ventral vagal,
Mm-hmm.
dorsal vagal. So they help us to either be in this regulated state. So the parasympathetic state is ventral vagal. And then
Mm-hmm.
dorsal vagal is the shutdown, the burnout we talked about. And
Oh.
then there's also a sympathetic nervous state.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a separate system. That's the
Mm-hmm.
stress. So there's those three nervous system states is really it's I think about it as like a operating system. So depending which one's in charge in that moment,
Mm-hmm.
it will really govern everything else in the body. So if I am in stress, I don't have time. Stress means the body has some sort of challenge or danger that it needs to deal with. So
Mm-hmm.
if I have a challenge to overcome, I will not have time for digestion or creativity as like, I will not enjoy the view because I have
Mm-hmm.
to, there's more important things to do. But when we are in the ventral vagal state, because that really innovates our face, our heart. So
Mm.
that's where, like, babies learn that if moms is smiling, then everything's good and safe, and they
Oh.
mimic it. So that's our social engagement nerve, and we are more creative, and we are
Mm.
more open to brainstorming other people's ideas. We can listen without trying to plan the answer because there's nothing to protect and defend.
Yes.
And then the third state is that dorsal vagal state where body decides that, okay, stress here is not really helping me anymore. If I
Mm-hmm.
continue being in a stress state, I'm really going to exhaust all of my resources. It's better just to shut down,
Mm-hmm.
it's an energy conservation. So it's
Wow.
very much like a protective mechanism.
Yeah. And when it shuts down, is that like someone curled up on the couch, just not doing anything? Like, is
Yeah.
that a shutdown? Yeah.
Yeah. And there's like a very different, like there's ranges. So it
Mm-hmm.
could be, I start to feel really tired by lunchtime. I was like,
Mm.
should I really take on this next big task?
Mm.
Or should I really maybe chill for 10 minutes, let
Mm-hmm.
myself recover, and then do something easy? Like
Mm.
that's like a very mild dorsal vagal response. It can look as, when we're ill, actually. When we're ill, then our body is in that state because everything else gets shut down because then, body can rest and repair.
Mm-hmm.
And then it can look like, I just really had a hard deadline at work, or I had really hard training session. I know I pushed too hard, and now I know I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna pay. Like I know I'm gonna pay. Like that's that state.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
Yeah.
You mentioned stress in the beginning being this thing that's like they almost like strive to like function. And I know in sport to perform, there's certainly benefits when our like adrenaline and cortisol are elevated when it comes to like opening up blood vessels and getting oxygen and things to these tissues so we can, bike really fast that sprint finish or, maybe there's like race nerves and all that stuff going too. Is this something in like a workplace setting that people should be they still need a little bit of stress to like do these important tasks, or are we trying to like avoid those stresses altogether, or is it more about kind of like riding that stress and then be able to come down from that stress appropriately?
Yeah, more like a wave because stress is great. Like
Mm-hmm.
stress is why we're alive and why we, when we don't like something and stress response kicks in, like we come up with solutions.
Yeah.
The reason, the babies start crawling is because they have discomfort of like a wet nappy on their back. I was like, okay, I need to get away from this. Like, that
Yes.
was the motivation. It's not like they wanted something fun.
Mm.
Like it was
Yeah.
the discomfort that pushed them
Mm.
to, start moving. And that's the same for us. Like evolution happens because of the discomfort and stress. So stress, we really need it. It's like, I want to grow my business, I need energy. I can't just be chill and, say, oh, whatever, I need energy to do things, reach my goals. But it's knowing when it's time to like, oh, okay, I can feel like my energy is getting low. That means that I need to just recharge my battery. It's when we think about it as just we are a human battery. We need energy, and when we use it up through stress, we need to just recharge it. And yeah, so stress is really helpful. Like when we have a big meeting, when we have a talk, when we have anything that's like, oh, I'm, even it's like, I'm really excited about this. So that's all stress. Like that's really just what keeps us moving. And with that comes also dopamine, and that gives us motivation. So it's just the balance of push and pause, push and pause. Like that's the key.
As opposed to just riding a cordial
Yeah.
high into like bedtime and then
Yeah.
trying to like crash. Yes. So how would one throughout their day go through, like you mentioned kind of like maybe someone's riding a stress high and they're like, man, I'm starting to feel like really mentally fatigued after this task, or whatever they're doing, talking about a reset. What does that reset look like? How often should someone be doing that? Is it like every day, multiple times a day, so many times through a week? Like how often and what should that look like?
It should be like a conversation with the body.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we're in stress, it almost feel like mind is the one that's leading, and the body has to just submit and do whatever the mind says.
Yeah.
But in reality, it's like we are one thing. So if we push our body over the edge, then it's not going to be any helpful for the mind either.
Yeah.
So it's understanding like I am a whole being. I need to listen to my mind and the body. It's like, okay, I need to get things done, but I'm also feeling tired. So where's my compromise? So it's finding like on hourly basis almost, it's sensing into like, okay, where I am right now. Do I want to keep going, or do I want to take a little break? And we have these natural rhythms, of course, like I find myself in the morning, I can probably work for 3 hours and I'm fine. I'm clear, I have energy, and then I take a break. I take really long breaks. So,
Yeah.
I take probably 3 hour break.
Wow. Yeah.
And then I come back in the afternoon, and I was like, I know that in the afternoon, I will just have to do maybe an hour there, maybe something easy, like just, tidying things up. So for me, it's like, I know already my patterns. But then sometimes I notice like, oh, I just started working. I'm already tired. It's like, what's going on? There's
Yeah.
something probably in the background, and I have my Oura ring. So kind of I check my heart rate, resting heart rate or variability. It's like, maybe I'm caught something, and, it's not full, illness, but it's like there's something going on in the background. Or maybe just like yesterday I actually worked too much. And that means like today, I don't feel as fresh. So I think we are so programmed from maybe industrial revolution days. That's like,
Yeah.
it's like you start at 6, you finish at 6, and you are a machine, and, you have to produce the same output a day in and day out. Our bodies are not machines, and there's so many variables that just keep checking in. It's like, how am I feeling? Is it good? It's like, is it bad?
And so when you take a break, for example, and again, I like totally see so many overlaps with our athletes in training, right? Is like checking in with your body is like, okay, yesterday I did my biggest session of the week, or there's a bunch of really hard intervals in there. Today is supposed to be a recovery spin. I wake up, I notice my heart rate's a little bit recovered and probably not as recovered from the training session yesterday. So I like really should focus on making this day light and easy. And I think that is something that I do see a lot of athletes have trouble with, especially new ones, like comprehending, because they think like every workout should be like super hard, super high heart rate, just like dripping in sweat to like get this change. And they're just never giving their body the time to recover. And then when they try, and then their coach is like programming and like saying like, do zone 1, do zone 2. And they're doing it, but they're not doing it. They're going like way over the target, doing much harder power or paces. They're just not giving their body that time to recover, like you're saying, and come down from these stimuli. And it also doesn't allow that adaptation to occur too, that the coach is trying to program. So there's very much that importance of like allowing the body to reset, recover, rebuild in that resting window. And then it also just makes me think about like people in a normal work week are just like, I've heard it from so many of my friends are just like they say working for the weekend, right? They're just like working so they can get to the weekend and then just like turn off their computer and then probably take care of all the stuff around the house too, is like the next thing. Right. But, yeah, I think a lot of the stuff you're saying is just, I resonate, and I definitely see it in my athletes and certainly new athletes too, with their programming there. So when you take your break, what does your break consist of to help you reset before you come back and get back on the computer or get back to work?
I go to the gym or I go for a walk in a park. It's my lunch break.
Yeah.
So it's everything that is really off screen. I do find myself listening to some podcasts sometimes, and then I feel like actually it's making me tired. So
Yeah.
it's already too much information. So then maybe I'll switch to music. But I got really good at doing nothing, just sitting, looking through
Yeah.
the window. But a lot of it's moving, moving my body, because I sit so much. I sit probably easily 7-8 hours a day, like
Yeah.
not just at my desk, but then in the evening. So I try to have movement breaks as much as I can in my day.
That's great. Yeah. I think that it's got to be so important too for the brain and your eyeballs. I feel like even taking a break from, the computer. And now too, there's like people try and find compromises with treadmill desks and all these things. They're still at their computer, but they're moving, trying to find that balance. When you're working with somebody too, are you doing any like breath work practices or things to help activate the parasympathetic nervous system to bring them out of that? Like, do you ever use the like fight, flight, or freeze
Yeah,
terminology as well? Yeah. When
yeah.
they're kind of like in these higher stress states.
We use a lot of I call it somatic tools. So basically body-based tools, and breathwork is one of them. So 4-6 breath, or any other breath that is longer out breath than in breath. So that
Okay.
helps. It helps body, your amygdala, your survival part of the brain, say, "Oh, I had more time to to breathe out. It means everything's okay. I'm safe." So that's a great simple practice, like even just 3-4 breaths like that really make a difference. We use an exercise called orienting. So because the danger and the survival gets switched on primarily when we get signals coming in from our eyes, our hearing, our taste, touch. So all that sensory input tells us that there is danger. I mean, it can look like an email right now, in modern day, or it can look
Yep.
like, oh, I heard someone, say this, whatever, and it really triggered me. So the sensory inputs tell us that there is danger, so we can reverse engineer that through this exercise called orienting, where we deliberately, really slowly look around the room, we listen, and we actually scan for danger. We tell our amygdalas, like, okay, right now it's all good, there is no danger, and you get a spontaneous deep breath, or like your shoulders drop. There's like a body sends you a signal when it feels like it came back to that regulation. Yeah, very simple. Like I feel like the athletes can do that. If they're cycling on the run, they can just listen to the surroundings. Like with that specific, thing in mind. Like is there any danger right now? And
Right.
really, there isn't.
Yeah.
So that really calms the nervous system. That really load on the eyes at the
Mhm.
computer, or when someone's doing maybe a long race and they really feel like I'm going into that shutdown state. A
Mhm.
good exercise is called cardio-ocular reflex. It was simply like an eye support. So what you do, like I'm wearing my glasses, but you basically take the palms of your hands
Huh?
and you press
Oh.
in your eyes.
Huh?
And ideally, you lean forward, so you kind of completely in this, like completely relaxed. Like
Okay.
I am not.
Resting.
Yeah, I'm completely resting, and through the optical nerve that really
Whoa.
then switches off that, switches you back to the parasympathetic state. And
Cool.
this
Huh.
one's really good. Like if you
Yeah.
can do that, like you feel tired. It's like, oh, let me just
Yeah.
do this exercise. And it's like someone said to me, oh, it's like a micro nap.
Yeah. How long do you suggest people do that for?
As much as you feel like. It can be a couple of
Yeah.
seconds. You can say, oh, maybe it's like just as long as it feels good.
Yeah. So for the listeners, if you're not watching the video, we took the palms of our hands and we put them on shut our eyes and put them on our eyes, and then leaned our elbows on the desk in front of us and just rested our head into that and with the pressure on the eyes. And it is very relaxing. And kind of, it just made me think of like when I put my eye mask on at night to go to sleep. It's like when you're turning the brain down to rest and relax. I like that tool. That's easy and anybody can do that. And the breath work too, so it's breathing in for 4 seconds, exhaling for 6 seconds,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Yeah.
And do you prefer out the mouth versus nose for the exhale?
Well, it do through the nose.
Okay. In the nose, out the nose?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think those are they're free tools, but I think what a lot of people have a hard time with, and maybe you have a solution for this, is people are feeling stressed, feeling stressed, and then they're not being reminded to use those tools. Is there anything or any way like you've seen be beneficial to actually help people, like when they're in those stress states, actually implement these tools?
So there's a couple of things. One, like you really need to practice them when you're not stressed.
Okay. Yep.
So that becomes then like almost like association is like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay, when I'm in this state, I can use this.
Yes.
So that's why, every week I have this um, call that I have with people where we
Mm-hmm.
do these sort of things. So it's deliberate practice. It's
Mm-hmm.
like training,
Mm-hmm.
you train before the race, and here's the same. You train before the stress. And then I having a post-it note, simple post-it note,
Yeah.
or you can write on your hand or whatever, something
Mm-hmm.
that like you see, and it's like
Yeah.
there's no way that you're gonna forget. You can even say, when I'm stressed and I feel like I do not have time, this is the time to take 3 slow breaths, and
Yeah.
then all of a sudden the perspective changes, and then you realize like, okay, it's not such a big deal. It's just I was hijacked by this survival.
Yeah, definitely. I think the insight in mind is certainly a helpful tool, like the post-it note, like you're saying. I see that too with, any kind of habit we're trying to help implement with a client or an athlete. You mentioned too the scanning the room piece, and that also makes me think of we've had a few like psychologists on the podcast as well, sports psychologists, and a lot of them brought up this concept of like when you have all this noise going on in your brain, like whether it's during a race or you're on the race start line and it's just loud and all these things going on, is essentially taking your thoughts from inside your brain and like thinking about things outside. And a lot of them were, I think one of them called it like the 5-5-5, where you like in your mind, like tell yourself 5 things you see and then tell yourself 5 things you
That's
hear,
orienting.
and 5 things you smell or feel or something like that. And so, yeah, it does remind me a bit of that. And I think that, yeah, is a very helpful tool to like get you out of your head and start, like you're saying, scanning. But now I understand why it is. You're scanning first to make you said your amygdala feel safe, that there's not a threat.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so cool.
It is. It's like our bodies are very simple and very complicated at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's like
Yeah.
to switch the nervous system state. Like when you practice these tools regularly, sometimes, like for me, even the thought of scanning the room resets me. Like, the Pavlov dogs, like the bell rings, like
Yep.
I feel like I'm like that with the orienting. It's like I start just looking around. It's like, oh, okay, I already feel like, I've reset.
Yeah, that's great. I do really like that. And now I've like made the connection of like why it makes sense and why it's helping your brain calm down. Okay, so I want to be mindful of your time. Tell us a little bit about the your business, what you offer. Tell us how it works. How can people sign up and work with you? All of that stuff.
I do a couple of things. So I am hosting a weekly research circle. On Fridays, we meet for an hour and we practice. We practice these tools. We bring more awareness in our thinking patterns and the beliefs that we probably outgrown. Most of our struggles right now as adults are coming from childhood, really. So it's not therapy, but it's awareness of where this could be coming from and really being in the present moment. So practicing mindfulness, practicing nervous system reset. And then I also work with people one-to-one. So who wants to delve in deeper? A lot of times if, there's lack of clarity or there's a sense of, it seems like on the surface everything's fine, but there's something missing, or there's a sense of anxiety. Like the stress and anxiety is bigger than it feels like, it should be where my life is right now. So then we work like just very gently with the nervous system because people I work with, they're very good at pushing. They're so good at, just doing more. And part of our work is learning to also incorporate rest because really rest is when we, like with the muscle, that's when we're actually becoming stronger. So it's the same with the nervous system. We build our resilience when we, instead of pushing us over the edge, we come to the edge. We want to still stretch ourselves, but we don't want to, it's like a rubber band. You don't want to snap it. You want to stretch it, but you don't want to go past that. And it's that reminder that rest is, it's not laziness. It's not, it's not gonna make you fall behind. It's like rest is really essential for you to achieve more. Because you'll have more clarity, you will have more energy, you will actually enjoy life. So it's that finding that balance. Like no one I work with struggle with not doing enough.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I think I can say the same for, my clients and athletes. I would describe a lot of them as all kind of like the type A, go, 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 got to do everything right, the right way at the right time, and there's they always feel like there's more to do or to do it better or to do it harder, to do it faster. And yes, so I think there's something to be said for like why they're the level of athlete that they're at, but then like you're saying, finding that balance and not reaching that burnout or chronic stress, I think is so important. What is your practice called? Where can people find it, sign up for it?
They can find me on my website, ritaainsworthcoaching.com. And there's 2 offerings there. They can reach out to me through the links there, or they can find me on LinkedIn, Rita Ainsworth.
Awesome. Well, we will link all those in the show notes for the listeners so they can check you out, work with you, sign up. And then I, of course, have to jump back to your 2 truths and a lie before we finish up here. So let's see. You said you once ran a half marathon without any training, that you hitchhiked across Europe in 2 days, and that you've walked on hot burning coals. I thought the hitchhiked across Europe in 2 days was the lie. Is that correct?
No.
Oh, no. Okay. Which one was the lie?
The lie was running half marathon without training.
Oh, that's probably a good thing. It's probably a good thing you didn't do that. But you have walked on hot coals. Please tell me, was that a baby bathwater thing? What was that?
No, that was my very first experience with kind of delving into personal development. And that was Anthony Robbins
Oh,
unleashing the power within. Yeah, that
yeah.
was,
Wow, that's so cool. Good for you. How was it? What was it like, burning hot?
no. So I guess because it was so much about mind control, like it wasn't, I mean, it wasn't long. It was probably
Yeah.
4 or 5 meters.
Yeah.
So uh, it was a lot of preparation, breath work, and that what helped really to put the body into the state of the not feeling the pain
Whoa.
and also not burning.
Whoa. So is that a tool he's like teaching that if you're in pain in general, you can utilize to like subside from the pain?
No, I think for him it was more like the mind has so much power, like our
Mm,
physical body. So you can
yeah.
really achieve so much more if you train your mind and if you have
Yeah.
the right mindset.
Cool.
Yeah.
Whoa, that's really neat. Awesome. And then you did hitchhike across Europe in 2 days.
Yeah. So I was living in Lithuania. That was when I was in my early 20s, and
Wow.
I didn't have money for plane tickets. So I hitchhiked to England.
Wow. Oh my gosh. That's wild. And so was this all via like cars and like
That
not
was
no trains, obviously,
That was
right?
thanks to truckers and
Yeah.
it was funny on the way back. It was me, luckily, and my boyfriend. I wasn't on my own, so
Right. Oh,
I was
good.
safe enough.
Yeah.
We were hitchhiking like in the dark in the night and in Belgium, and this guy was coming back from a rave. He's like, "Come and stay in my apartment, and then tomorrow morning after work, I'll take you to the border of France." It's like,
Oh
great.
my gosh. Oh, goodness, Rita, I'm so glad you were with your boyfriend and that went all well because I listened to too many murder podcasts and that sounds like it could have gone the wrong way. Oh, wow. Well, I'm glad that it was a safe, successful journey across Europe. Very cool. Well, this has been super fascinating. I mean, like I said, I wanted to have you on here because I see so much overlap with what we were talking about and the athlete population I work with and utilizing these tools. And there's certainly becoming like a space for sports psychologists, and I think there's a great purpose for that for the athletes at a very high level, but also a lot of my clients are competitive athletes, but they work full-time jobs and they have families and they're trying to do all these things. And yeah, so I think it's important for other people to hear this and be able to utilize your resources and help like prevent that burnout. So we're not like, I think the other thing too we see, sorry to keep going on you, but like I have clients where they say they love their jobs, which I believe them, and they just work, but then they need like a week or two vacation, or they have to like, take off a good chunk of time from work because their body needs to like reset. And yeah, so I think there's certainly some balance. I think a lot of people need to find there, which is
Yeah.
why we have you here.
Yeah, I think for what I find is that people, there is a fear, like successful people fear that if I stop, that I will never want to start again.
Mm,
So instead of you know pausing and seeing how it's gonna work out, they just keep pushing. But like
yeah.
the enjoyment of work and life comes from rest and those intense moments. Like
Yes.
that's like for me. Um, I mean, I think because the older I get, the more I want to enjoy my life because I realize
Yes.
how actually short it is.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. 100%. I
Yeah.
think you are spot on. Well, this has been so fascinating, Rita. Again, thank you so much for your time and sharing all this with me and my listeners. Now I have some tools in my toolbox that I can use and to pay attention and listen to those signs and signals from the body. And like I said, for our listeners, we'll link all this in the show notes so they can come check you out and find you, follow you. And thank you again so much for your time, Rita.
Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, if anyone has questions, just please reach out. And I love talking about this. I love helping people. So I'd be more than happy.
Perfect. We will do that.
To stay up to date with the Nutritional Revolution recent activities, follow Nutritional Revolution on Instagram and Facebook, and sign up to receive the Nutritional Revolution newsletters on the Nutritional Revolution website. If you guys enjoyed today's content, please hit subscribe below to stay up to date on the latest Nutritional Revolution posts. Have a healthy day.